Violent clashes broke out this weekend in Portland, Oregon. Police say 4 people were arrested during demonstrations. The dueling protests involved anti-fascists known as Antifa and right-wing groups. Here's Jennifer Dowling from our affiliate KOIN.
It was a challenge to separate Antifa and the Patriot Prayer group from clashing. The pepper spray was flying. Sometimes bottles and other objects got tossed into the crowd. Scuffles broke out periodically, sometimes involving backpacks, hats, and flags. On the Patriot Prayer side, this freedom of speech rally was supposed to be a send-off for Tiny Toese. He was arrested during a scuffle with Antifa at last year's event.
Last thing we want is for Tiny to wind up going to jail before he has to go home.
A fight interrupted this interview, and out of a mass of people shoving, Tiny appeared. He just finished washing pepper spray out of his eyes when we caught up with him to ask about his trip home to the Samoan Islands.
How does it feel to be back for this last rally?
It's sad. We've been trying the whole time we've been coming into Portland. Everything has been good. But, I think one of the problem here in Portland is the higher ups in Portland, starting from the mayor, the council, everybody. They need to do what's right, start standing up against these extremists.
Tiny was not detained this year, but there were still people taken away in cuffs. This man with blood streaming down his face. And another man was prevented from entering the park after officers found a 3-inch pocket knife on him. He was also taken away.
You're citing a law that doesn't exist. What am I being detained for? What am I being arrested for? Just tell me, what am I being arrested for?
We talked to him after his release.
And then they said that I was failing to comply with a federal officer, and I went with them and we got a discussion. I'm going to appear in federal court.
There were shields in the crowd, and police confiscated what weapons they could. Those protesting Patriot Prayer told us they originally started this as a protest against police.
The protest was about police brutality, and that's something that has been pretty prevalent in my life.
We came out here to protest police violence. They came out here to taunt us.
Then it became about taking a stand against the other group.
They are the epitome of Trump supporters.
Group over there definitely changed the atmosphere.
Fascism loses always, and because they hate everybody and promote racist ideologies, and they're homophobic. And this.
As for Tiny, though he's leaving, he says he'll be back.
And I will be leaving for the islands, but believe me when I say I will be back. The Big Boy Tiny story just started, and it ain't ending soon. We're going to come out here with my brothers. We're going to hit Portland. We're going to hit it hard.
Randy Blazak is chair of the Oregon Coalition Against Hate Crime, and he joins me now from Portland. Randy, can you first tell us more about the groups that clashed on Sunday, Patriot Prayer and the anti-fascist group?
Well, they're not very well organized groups. They're really sort of countercultures in their own respective terms. I mean, there's been this emerging alt-right world that has kind of come out into the streets the last few years. The anti-fascists have always been a part of the Portland culture. 20 years ago, it was the racist skinheads versus the anti-racist skinheads. So this is just the latest version of kind of a new battle that's been running in Portland a long time. The anti-fascists see themselves as kind of meeting this challenge of this new wave of right-wing extremism that includes the Patriot Prayer. Patriot Prayer is just a small group among many that include white supremacist groups and nationalist groups and anti-immigrant groups. I mean, there's a whole kind of constellation of groups under that umbrella, and they've made Portland kind of their staging center for their activism.
And why is that? Violent clashes involving white supremacist groups broke out in Portland last year. Why is Portland specifically seeing these events?
Yeah, I mean, Portland is a place where people come to protest. I mean, we've got a long history that goes back to the founding of the state. I mean, the Ku Klux Klan really ran the state in the 1920s. So it's not anything that's all of a sudden been sprung on the city of Portland. There's a reason why it's predominantly a white city. And so both sides, for that reason, have kind of seen Portland as having very symbolic value, either to win or defend or to transform or to preserve. I mean, it's all this very defensive positioning. One side, you know, the nationalists and the Patriot folks call the other side communist, and the Antifa call the other side Nazis, and it's just sort of this moral combat that they're locked in the streets of Portland.
Well, the Oregonian wrote in its story about the violence that Sunday's events marked, quote, the first large street protest of the spring. Should we expect more dueling protests like this as the year goes on?
Well, one of the things that we've seen nationwide and in the Northwest is the alt-right has lost a little bit of its steam. I think many of those folks thought that they were a part of the Trump supporter momentum. And so what we were seeing a year ago with large crowds of supporters of both Trump and the nationalist anti-immigrant movement kind of converging have really not coalesced so far this year. But the year is still young. We might see more of it this year, but it really doesn't seem to have the energy or momentum that it had a year ago.
All right, Randy Blazak, thank you very much, Randy, for your time.
My pleasure.